Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Dropping Down from the Rafters podcast here on Toned In Entertainment. Now, about 3 months ago, I met up with Shawn Phoenix at Florida Wrestling Empire. We did quite a lengthy interview for a show interview. And when we finished, or we had to wrap it up for time reasons, the one thing we said was, we need to continue. There's more to talk about. And once we started thinking about ideas for another podcast, we thought it's only appropriate to do Aliens and UFO. So joining me here on the podcast is the Unbreakable Shawn Phoenix. Once again, how you doing, Shawn?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. And sorry that that last one went a little bit too long. And it's ironic because I was really rushed for time, and I was like, I'm probably going to cut it short. I'm sorry, but hopefully it wasn't not entertaining.
Oh, it was definitely good. You were the first match of the show, and you got priorities. You got to do your wrestling show, and it's all good. But we got a podcast here tonight. We got nowhere to be, nowhere to go, other than to talk about aliens and UFOs. So I can't wait to dig into this. So let's just get right into it. You had sent me a message about, wanting to do a podcast about this, that you've recently gone down the rabbit hole of aliens and UFOs. So let's just start with that.
Well, first of all, let me preface this by saying this has always been an interest of mine. I recall probably when I was like 12, 13, preteen, early teen years, thinking if I ever saw anything, would I say anything? Because the stigma of it all, especially back then, this would have been like, the early 2000s, was, it's always like, you got that guy coming out with a, beer stained white tank top, like, I've seen them aliens, right? And just, even if you aren't that person, that's just what the stigma was. And I always, kind of like had that thought of like, what would I do if I saw something unbelievable? And at one point in my life, my dad had told me that he saw something in the 70s. And I know he was like, oh, he's a hippie. No, like my dad, at most drank alcohol, but like he didn't really experiment with drugs. But he was telling me about like how he was in Ocean City, Maryland, and saw something in the sky. And from that point on, he was kind of like really open minded to it. Where my mom, not so much. But it was always something that fascinated me, especially growing up with my love of Star Wars and Star Trek. Whatever. I'm a sci-fi kid, and like I said, I've just always been fascinated by that. And the first time I saw something unexplainable in the night sky was 2006. It would have been probably like June, July of 2006. My buddy and I were in my swimming pool at my dad's house. It was a clear night, and I live in the city of Pittsburgh, like not like downtown, but it's it's a city, and there's light pollution, right? So whenever we get a clear night, it's kind of like a noticeable thing. Oh wow, look how many stars there are, versus being out in the countryside, which I get to see every now and then when I'm traveling to shows, across states and stuff like that, getting out at a rest stop and just being blown away by the beauty of it all. But I remember it was pretty clear, and we were looking up in the sky, and we may have even talked about seeing like unexplainable things. And I couldn't tell you what time it was, but at some point while we're looking up, my buddy, his name is JP, is like, dude. And I was like, what? And he's like, I just saw something. I was like, no, you didn't. Like, shut up. And so then he was like, he like pulled me in close, and he was like, you see that bright star right there? Like, for arguments, like let's say we're looking at, the North Star, right? Like there's an easily identifiable star in the sky. I was like, yeah. He goes, okay, well, if that's the center of the clock, go to 1 o'clock. And around that dark area, he said that he saw a flash of light fade in and then fade out. And as he was saying that, it happened just a couple hairs over. And I was like, oh my God, like that. And he goes, that was it. That was it. I got chills now talking about that. And it was just such an incredible thing, because I know with living in the city of Pittsburgh, I also live, a stone's throw away from a private airport that we're actually, whatever WWE's in town, corporate flies in and lands there and takes a limo just to avoid the public It's actually pretty cool. I actually got to see the WWE corporate jet this past year, but I know what planes look like. Like it's something that you just grow up with. I know what birds look like. I know what a shooting star looks like. I know what a meteor shower looks like. I know what a satellite looks like. Not a lot of people know what that looks like. What we saw that night was none of the above, and we were like super like charged up. We're like, oh my god, I can't believe I saw that. And then from that point on, it was kind of a yes, I am going to tell people what I saw, because it was so unexplainable that, like, in a weird way, even though I had my buddy with me and he saw it as well, it's just kind of a, like the stigma of it not being real. It's kind of like an oxymoron, like viewing something that you are told you can't be viewing, and there's that kind of like inner, conflict of trying to reason with what you're seeing, and then just seeing something incredible that you want to share with people. And I've only really shared that with people that I was close with, but then it was really weird because I remember this clear as day. We're in the pool and we're kind of like really hyped up, and then super super bizarre. So like my dad like lives like on like a side street, so there's like a hillside, like a road. A lightning bug flew. It was just like kind of like I say fly, bugs fly. It flew up over our bushes. I'll pull the camera. It flew up over the bushes and then went down and then came up over the railing on the pole, then came back down and then like skidded like just above the water. So like probably no more than like 6 inches. And it was very slow moving. And then it was just flying in a straight path. And it went up over the other side of the guardrail and then like into the next following yards. But it was really weird because it wasn't strobing like your typical lightning bug. And also, I remember it wasn't your typical yellow greenish glow of a lightning bug. It was a non-blinking white light. And we saw it and we saw the way that it was acting. We were like, what the heck is that? Because we're trying to rationalize. It's a lightning bug. And the more we're looking at it, the more we're like, I don't think that's a lightning bug. And then I remember the vibes changed. Like we got like really uncomfortable. We're like, let's get the hell out of here. And like I got chills now talking about this. So like we kind of like freaked out. Like we were kind of like scared. And like we jumped out of the pool and like we ran. Like we didn't like walk. Like we ran to my house, which I had a long backyard. And then we were kind of like, what was that? Like that was really weird, right? And then we just kind of like forgot all about that because we couldn't really say that was connected to what we just saw. It was just kind of like a strange coincidence that we saw something that was pretty weird at eye level. But the more that I read into stuff now, I 100% believe that thing that we saw was connected to the phenomenon in the sky that night. So, yeah, so that's the first experience. So this was over, roughly over 20 years ago. And it's funny because I don't want to like hog up, just talking. I want to, let you have control of this. But the reason why I bring all that up is, I've been into this for a long time with interest going in and out, like it wasn't something that I actively was like researching, right? It was just something that I would experience every now and then. And then at one point, I want to say in my early 20s, I decided to write everything down, like every experience that I had on like a Microsoft Word document with as much information as possible, who I was with, what the date was, what time it was roughly, just to kind of like keep track in case like I forgot. And I guess I was like maybe like paranoid, like I'm like ruffling too many feathers. Like they're gonna like, wipe my memory. Like the Men in Black are gonna come. Like I need to write this down, right? Which is, kind of bizarre, but like who's to say that doesn't happen, right? So like I wrote all this stuff down on this Microsoft Word document, and then fast forward, unrelated. I moved out. My computer was running slow, so I wiped my computer, put everything on my external hard drive, wiped my computer to get it running quicker. And then around December time, my external hard drive crashed, and it was very, very heartbreaking because all of my full matches are on there that I documented, all of my full wrestling matches, not just in professional wrestling, but also in backyard wrestling, dating back to 2003. And it's very heartbreaking, but that phenomenon document was also on that external hard drive. I'm like, yeah, bummer, right? Well, in March, I started experiencing a lot of really bizarre coincidences in my life. I believe, now the phrase is synchronicities. And I'm not just saying like, oh, I wonder what such and such is doing. Then they like call me the next day. It was like, really more. Of course, I don't remember because it's been so many months, but it was a lot more like, how the heck is this happening type of thing. Like thinking about like a band and then like them announcing like they're breaking up the next day, like stuff that other people could experience as well as I'm, so it wasn't just a personal synchronicity. And it was happening so frequently that like I started getting like really paranoid, spoke to my therapist about it, yada, yada, yada. That's just how the universe works. Well, then I realized I learned that a buddy of mine from when we posted on a message board years and years ago had passed. And back then he was, I considered him like an older brother to me. At some point we lost touch. So I'm going through our Facebook messages, like, like where did we lose touch? Like what happened? Were we just older and just, adults? And son of a gun, I had copied and pasted that phenomenon document and sent it to him years and years ago. So I was able to retrieve it. But like, how weird is that? Like, had he not passed, I would have never thought, I would have never had a reason to go through everything, like that. And I was also dealing, like, experiencing more synchronicities in my life relating to the UAP, UFO phenomenon. And that was kind of more of like a moment of, okay, this is the universe telling me this is kind of what I'm supposed to be doing. Because even like before then, I was really listening to a lot of like unsolved, missing persons podcasts. Like whenever I'd be on a road trip going to shows, there was one podcast. It's funny. It actually started with a crime known as West Memphis 3. Listening to that back in like November of last year. And then every time I'd go on a show, I'd listen to more and more episodes. Then it would go to this unexplained mystery of this missing person. And it was called Up and Vanished. And then like the next season. And then, so come February, the spy balloon over America happened. And at the same time, I'm listening to the sister podcast to the Up and Vanished podcast known as High Strange, which was just about UFOs. And it's funny because before that point, I'm thinking, like, I wonder if this is kind of like something I'm supposed to be doing, like looking into like more missing people and missing persons cases, because I then learned that, a area no further than like 15 minutes away from me, there was a unexplained missing persons case that still is unexplained to this day. And it was like a pretty popular artist in the community. And she literally just up and vanished. And they found her like purse or something like a couple miles away. But other than that, this pretty beloved woman just disappeared. And I was like, I wonder if the synchronicities in my life are telling me I need to look into this, unsolved mystery. But then that kind of, I kind of flirted with the idea, and then all the UFO talk and everything like that. I was like, well, let me dive into that. And then just all the stuff going on behind the scenes with David Grush coming forward and stuff like that. It kind of became a little bit more acceptable to talk about, I feel. It was kind of like, okay, everything that's leading, like all these synchronicities, finding this document and everything like that, I'm going full in. Like this is my hyperfixation. And like I said, my first experience with the unexplained aerial phenomenon was back in 2006. And looking at this document, one of the fascinating things is every time I saw something was with somebody else, which I think adds a little bit more validity to it. Also, I want to point out to those that don't know me, I'm straight edge. I've always, I've never been high, I've never been drunk. So it's never been like, oh man, what are you smoking? I've never had that. I've never been diagnosed with any sort of, hallucinations or anything like that. Like other than, depression and anxiety and ADHD, I'm pretty, sound of mind, right? Like what I'm seeing. And I've got friends with me seeing it as well. But up until I want to say July, I've seen like around like 9 things in the sky since 2006. Since then, since July alone, I've seen 12.
So
and
you're talking
that
12 in like 3 months. No, yeah, 3 months, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I, kind of wanted to talk about is just like the frequency of it all is increasing. And I have some theories to that. So first of all, what is your take on the phenomenon? I know you had said you had gone to the Roswell crash site. You sent me pictures. You're clearly not a skeptic, I would believe. But do you have any theories? I'm curious to hear what you think.
I mean, definitely. I find it hard to believe that anybody doesn't think that we're alone, right? Okay, this massive, massive, massive. I mean, we can't even like explore Mars, right? Let alone, let alone the rest of the galaxy, the universe, everything else that's
Right.
out there, right?
It's pretty
I mean,
selfish to think that we're so special, but continue.
yes. Hold
And
on.
that, yeah.
Let's take one question right here before I dive into because Cherry Bombs wants to know if you think that aliens are trying to communicate with you.
Well, how do I answer this as not crazy as this sounds? Yes, but at the same time, I don't know that they're aliens. And that's one of the things too that the researching that I've looked into. The phrase UFO is now UAP because of the stigma of unidentified objects is so cartoony. Now it is I think unanimous air. Unanimous aerial phenomenon, something like that, which leaves it open to not just flying. It could be other things as well, like in the ocean and stuff like that. And the reason I bring that up is because they also no longer refer to what we know as extraterrestrials as ETs. They are now referred to as NHIs, which stands for non-human intelligence. And the reason that is because we don't know what they are, right? Like, as far as the public's concerned, the Navy is it declassified or unclassified?
Declassified, I
Unclassified.
think, right? Declassified,
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah. English isn't my
We're not
strong
experts
suit.
on government
Yeah, right.
lingo.
But they in 2017 they released videos and said like, yeah, we don't know what these things are, which is pretty much them saying these UAPs exist, and that's when the phrase came. But we don't know what they are. They're not. We can't say they're this, they're that. And a lot of theories now are not so much extraterrestrial, rather interdimensional, which is something I can't even comprehend. But who's to say that that's not happening, right? Because it's entirely possible that one, like you said, with a galaxy being so infinite that the possibilities are endless, right? But what if there's more to life than the 3D world? What if our 3D brains can't even comprehend a realm around us. And the fourth dimension, that's not a new thing, but the concept of these things coming to our planet, they may have been here all along, and we just haven't been able to see them. Like, there's things that go on in our 3D world that we can't see, like sound waves, right? So it's not out of the realm to believe, or be open to the possibility of um, if, something, we can't even see, like a text message, right? Like, think about how bizarre that is. That is something being compressed and sent to space and then coming back down. Like, it's doing that, but I'm not seeing it. So not seeing is also not believing. So I'm open to that idea as well. It could be interdimensional. It could be extraterrestrial traveling within the fourth dimension. Like, and that's just a whole new realm of a way to think, and that's bizarre. But to answer your question, I don't know if they're trying to communicate with me. I remember I told my buddy a while ago, because he was really into UFOs. Whenever I would see something, he threw a silly theory out there. He was like, "What if you're like part alien and they're checking on you?" And I was like, "I don't know about all that." But some of the theories that I've seen now, um, there might be some credence to that. And I know how crazy that sounds. And also, let me preface this by saying any theory that I'm throwing out there, I'm not saying I'm believing. It's fun to think about because we don't know. There's a theory that the human species, the origins of the human species, is created from crossbreeding of extraterrestrial life and primates, because of the fact that the missing link, we don't know where that transition happened. There's a missing step there that we can't see when we evolve to what we are now. Not only that, but the human body is not made for this planet. It is, think about evolution. We gain things to protect ourselves. And I see that question. I'll grab that in a second. We adapt to the environment, right? To, for a survival of the fittest, where, for example, a way to combat sun and sunburn, a lot of animals grew body hair. Well, we lost it. We went from the theory of being covered in body hair to a lot more skin exposed. Not only that, but think about how bad our knees and backs get. That, because the gravity is taking a toll on our bodies. And a lot of people can't figure out why that is, because we should have been able to adapt to this. And now I've heard theories that we shouldn't be walking up on two legs just based on the gravity and what it does to our body. Well, it makes a lot more sense to think about that we're not originally from this planet, and it's taking a toll on us. Once again, not saying it's true. Bizarre theory to think about. Who's to say it didn't happen? So let's see. What was that question?
It says, what have you heard about the theory that we are not from this world, which you kind of touched on, and what is your take on it? So
yeah, and like, that's the thing, is there's so many possibilities. We could be, we could be a science experiment from these NHIs, whether they're extraterrestrial, whether they're interdimensional, whether, whatever. The best way I like to explain it, because my dad was like, why do you think we see them, but, they're not doing anything? And in the same realm of, are they dangerous? Could they be dangerous? And I was like, well, no, because if they have these technologies that they say, that we are seeing, them doing these maneuvers that we can't do, they would wipe us out. If they have that much technological advancement, they could have wiped us out a long time ago. So the fact that they haven't is kind of a peaceful thought, that they have the capability of it, probably. So they're not malevolent. Now, there could be malevolent ones out there, but so that alone means that they're, probably benevolent. But then why aren't their presence more widely known? And the best way to explain it is a theory that I heard from the High Strains podcast is we are the ant farm on their desk. And what they said in the podcast, which is really interesting, is imagine like walking through the woods and like there's like deer, raccoon, possum, bear, and stuff like that. There's different levels of intelligence and threat to you as a human being. Now, say you're walking these woods knowing these animals are out there and you see an anthill. Well, you and I know that little ant can't comprehend how to pay a mortgage. You and I know that even if we were to, lean down and speak to it, that ant does not have the capability to process what I'm saying. It may see me, it may hear loud noises. I don't even know if they can hear. But they're not going to understand. And even animals can't really understand. I mean, they can learn phrases, but you're not really going to try and sit there and keep on speaking to them like, hey, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You just kind of let them go. Unless you're a jerk, you might like step on it, right? Which could be a possibility. Like I said, there could be those malevolent ones out there. But for the most part, I believe we are so far on the scientific totem pole as far as what's out there that whether we are a science experiment, that we are being viewed like just like, hey, look at that. There's Earth. Let's see what they're up to, right? Or if it's just like there's so much going on that we can't even comprehend what's going on. So I think, there's that as well. I don't even know how I got onto this particular tangent. But
let's circle back here for a second, because you were asking me kind of like what my stance was on it.
Yeah.
So, and I had sent you some pictures earlier in the week about, going to Roswell and Machu Picchu, and down here in Homestead, Florida, we have the Coral Castle. And every time my wife and I go on a trip, we actually try to find something a little bit either alien or a little paranormal. Like we enjoy like ghost walking tours in Gatlinburg, and
right.
we are very open-minded.
Right.
And yes, I mean, I obviously believe that there's other entities out there for sure. And
Right.
one of the places that when I visited Machu Picchu out in Peru, like to get up there is insane. Like in order to get to this top of this mountain in the clouds, but yet there's this whole civilization built up there. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Even if you were trying to construct it today, like it would be insane to try to build that. Just the way that the road is so narrow with the pathway, and how long it takes to get up there in a bus, let alone walking and pulling gravel. Like it doesn't make sense to me.
Right. There's you can't find the logics there.
Right. And, we went to Roswell, and they've only done, to my knowledge, only one UFO crash site tour ever. And it happened to be the year that we were there, that this group had permission. It just happened to be, and we did the tour, and it was cool. Like, it's interesting to think that you're at a place where something happened in 1947, that something crazy could have happened there that's not been told to us. And when we went there, and it was with a group of people. I think it was 2 like school buses full of people, 2 or 3, can't remember how many, full of people. And some people were there and they're like, oh, I feel the energy and I feel this and I feel that. Did we feel anything? No, we didn't. That's being honest. But the fact is, just because I didn't feel the energy doesn't mean that somebody else didn't feel the energy.
And that's one of the things I want to, let's put an asterisk on that, because I want to bounce back to that, but continue.
And then, just going to Roswell, and then I think, Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, we went out there. We went to Utah in July this year, right after our interview, a couple weeks after, and we started going down the rabbit hole, Skinwalker Ranch on the TV show, and they have a tour that literally takes you as legally close as possible. Actually, I'm wearing my shirt tonight.
There you go.
For the tour right there. But they own the property next to it, and they take you up in a little buggy and stuff, and you can kind of see it, and it's cool. And the lady there says that she's never seen anything, but they have campers that come out who believe that they feel something, that they see something.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just like in anything. Some of us I think, are destined, or they gravitate towards maybe feeling something where, my personal self, I've never experienced anything like that
Right.
before.
Right. Yeah, I'm so jealous you get to go on those. But what
Put it
I
on your agenda, Shawn. Put it on your
yeah,
agenda.
I actually booked a flight to Colorado. I got a booking out there, and while I'm out there, like specifically, I know there is something similar to Skinwalker Ranch. It is a UFO tower where there's like a lot of sightings there. So I'm like, I want to go see this. I'll get a booking. Knock out two birds with one stone. But I've actually never watched Ancient Aliens. Never. A lot of this, not that I don't believe it. I realize that there's a lot of fabrication being added to a lot of stuff. Alien shows, ghost shows, and whatever. That I just think it's best to kind of avoid that, because it's an entertainment product, right? Not that I'm opposed to being entertained. It's just like that kind of. I don't know the validity of what is sincere on a TV show versus my dad telling me like he saw something. Like he has no reason to lie about that. He's not gaining anything. But you have ratings, right, on TV show. But it's funny that you mentioned paranormal, because that was also something that I got really into back in the early 2010s. Honestly, probably why I kind of like went away from UFOs. But it's funny because as a kid, I was always terrified of the thought of ghosts. Like even just talking about like, oh, my house is haunted. Like I would be up like all night with my lights on. Like I'd be terrified.
I think if somebody says they're not terrified of ghosts, they have to be lying, right? Because I mean,
right.
seriously.
But like, I mean, like even like I didn't like horror movies or anything like that. Like I was just like, it was just I didn't comprehend what that thought of it being real. I was raised Christian. I was atheist until I started experiencing all this and all the theories going on, and now I say I'm a little bit agnostic now, which is super weird because of how like openly atheist I was. But I was so afraid of the paranormal that I was at a buddy's house and I was supposed to stay there. It was when we were backyard wrestling. And he was like, "Oh yeah, my house is haunted." And I was like, "Oh my God, I got catfish. I did not know that. I would not have come here." And we had some pretty crazy experiences. Like the door was shaking. I literally watched a bag just fall off, like a book bag fall off of a shelf a shelf. And then like the door was like shaking and it was getting more and more violent. And like there was like 6 of us in the room and we were so scared that like my buddy who lived there was like on the verge of tears. And I was like, "Aren't you used to this?" And he was like, "You never get used to this." And I'm like, "That's a valid point." But like I would say there was like 6 of us and we're all like huddled as far away from the door as possible, like skin on skin, like early 20s, like on the verge of tears, terrified. Well, it turns out that his mom had heard that either I was super scared or somebody else was super scared, so they were like pranking us. Now, the sensation of the bag falling, that was not the mom. Like I saw that. And I also felt like a cold front go through my body. But the more theatrical things that we were experiencing was the mom. And I kind of realized that was the scariest thing I've ever been through in my life, because I was so afraid of ghosts and stuff like that. But I survived. And then kind of opened my mind up to more of the paranormal and stuff like that. And then, long story short, that buddy ended up moving in with me for a little bit. And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll try a Ouija board." And I always thought that was just kind of like a party game. But the first time I experienced it and feeling that oracle move, it was so otherworldly. Once again, long story short, my grandmother had just passed, and I was asking, "Are you with my grandfather?" And she says, "Yeah." And fast forward, we said goodbye, and it started spelling LOVE, and of course, I know what it's going to spell. Like literally, I think my grandma's funeral was like the next day. Like it was like super super fresh, and like whenever I asked if it was my grandma, like I felt this overwhelming sense of calm and comfortability. but as it says Loveyyo, and I'm like, okay, I really know his spelling. And then it's just me on the Oracle at this point. Like, it specifically asked for everyone to remove their fingers, like their hand. And then the Oracle went to the center of the board, and then went down to like 5 o'clock, and then swirled up to 12 o'clock, and then went down to like 7 o'clock, and then landed in the center, and then slid down to the U. And like, as it was doing that, I thought it was like a big, like a wind up pitch, right? And I was like laughing because, like, okay, you know, my grandfather's a prankster. I didn't realize until telling this to my brothers the next night that what it did was it started here. If you can follow my finger, it started in the center, then it went down. I went out of screen. It went down, then went up, and then went down, then went up. It made a heart. And I didn't even realize that until I was telling my brothers about it. So I was like, okay, I'm really open to this. So then we started ghost hunting and stuff like that. But I think, once again, I think there is this other dimension that we haven't even comprehended, that I 100% believe paranormal and NHI exists within that realm. I 100% think it's no more than like a radio frequency that, you know, we haven't been able to figure out, so to speak. They are there. It's like a, you know, it's so hard to comprehend, because then I even like try and like question myself, and I don't have the answers to it. But it's like, well, if it's there, like, why aren't we bumping into them? I don't know. You know, like, I don't know why I'm not physically like hitting like a, you know, like an entity and like stopping my. I don't know. I don't have the answers to that, and I don't think anybody does. And it's really like really a complex thing to think about, to have these theories and not have the answers to your own contradictions. But I mentioned that asterisk, and I wanted to come back to this. Back in 2006, when we witnessed that phenomenon, I had a theory that we saw something in the sky because we wanted to see something in the sky. And I don't mean that in the sense of like seeing what you want to see, you know, like, oh yeah, that's, you know, what's the best example of saying that, you know, like
It's
kind
just
of like lying
to believe
lying
something, right? Yeah.
like lying to yourself, like, oh, that's what that was, you know. I think legitimately there is a connection between whatever this is and whatever that is. And I think whenever you open your mind up to that, you kind of tap into that. And it's funny because whenever we would do paranormal investigations, I would always get like really crazy experiences. Like, I've seen things, I've felt things, I've heard things, you know. And it's funny because of how, you know, growing up, how against ghosts I was. And so my siblings think that I'm kind of, I think that the phrase is clairvoyant. Is that the term? Where you're like really tapped into that. You're not necessarily like a medium, but you're more in tune with that realm. I think it's clairvoyant.
Again, we're not expert on terms
Yeah,
here.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And admittedly, this is more of a paranormal term than NHI. So I haven't seen that word lately because I haven't been down in that rabbit hole. But I think there is something to that. And then I recently learned that there is a UFO expert, and I say that in quotes because how can someone be an expert on something we can't really identify? And I take that with a grain of salt. He believes that there is a spiritual connection to that realm as well. And it has to do with relaxing and meditating, that type of thing, and getting in tune with, like your psyche. And for context, I just learned recently in an unrelated thing that hypnosis is a real thing. Like, I thought all that was for show.
Oh no, I believe that's a real thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like scientifically backed. Like, I had no idea. I just thought it was all like a big sham. I'm a pro wrestler, right? But I think, and the best way that I've explained it to people is, I don't know how close to this gentleman, I think his name's Stephen Greer, how close this is to his theory, but I think humans have stunted their possibility in life. I think we have stopped momentum of inner growth and evolution. Um, and the best way to kind of explain that in a visual metaphor, in a visual explanation, is like, think about like the 60s and the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, how visually different those eras were, right? And then compare to 2010, and then compare 2010 to 2017. Like, there isn't like a drastic difference in culture. And I was thinking about this, like, why do these years and decades feel so much like the same? And the reason why I think that is because of the very reason that I'm able to speak with you right now. Is I think whenever we introduced advanced technology, whether it be internet, I guess essentially what it started with the internet, really, or maybe even color TV, or just TV in general. It became more and more technologically based research, so to speak, and we got more sucked into the technology aspect of it rather than in kind of like doing ourselves a disservice. And I'm not saying that's the reason why. I just think that that's the best way to kind of explain it. I think we are, not allowing ourselves to be familiar with ourselves. And I realize how much of a hippie I sound like, but I'm not. I think there is a metaphorical muscle or whatever that we have that we can flex that is essentially a whole nother sense. Like, think about like working out and like hearing somebody say like, oh, my muscles hurt in areas where I didn't even know I had muscles. Like, have you ever heard someone say that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I think it's a pretty
I think
similar
I've said it
thing.
before too. Yes.
I think it's a pretty similar thing. It's like you don't know what you have until you start working it. And I think more of a mental sense is a very similar thing. Is we have this ability to kind of connect as well as we can to the world around us and that realm around us, but we don't know how to do it. It's not like a typical like flexing a finger. It's an inter thing that we have to learn how to do, and meditating might be the best way to get in tune with that. But I think the more you do that, the more experiences you're going to have. And that's one of the reasons why I think I'm seeing them a lot more. Now, here's where it gets wild.
Okay,
So,
we're 44 minutes in and we're just getting wild right now.
I realized how silly you got us.
No,
I
let's
realized how
buckle
silly
our
it is.
seatbelts right now. We're gonna strap on right now. Okay.
Because, I mean, up until this point, it's pretty much just been like theories and like what I think could be and might be. But I said since July alone, I've seen like 12 things, and there's a huge change because going through my document, I would say I'd see something maybe once every so many years. But since July alone, there has been an increase in the phenomenon. Well, in my research and in being hyperfixated on this, also coincidentally, I happen to have been scheduled off work the day of the congressional hearing of the UAP Disclosure Act. And I happened to be off work and I was like watching it on YouTube and I was like, this is so weird. One, I'm watching like a government thing, like what the hell? But also it was more so surprising to hear these people in suits taking this seriously. Like, that was more unbelievable than, the possibility of not being alone.
I
But
agree. Yes.
yeah, right. Like, the stigma is getting, less and less. Where it's funny because like then I was like, you know what? It's a nice day. It's July 26th. I'm gonna go watch on my phone on my hammock hanging from my my tree that I just got. And I live on a back road, my house now, and like there's so many vacant houses just because like just how it is. And like a car went past and I looked up and it's the Google Maps car. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I wonder if they're gonna see me. And then like every so many, like probably like a half hour later, another car went past and I'm looking. But then sure enough, the Google Maps car came by again. And I'm like consciously looking and I wave at it. And sure enough, you can see me on Google Maps in my hammock waving to the car. But it's funny because had I not decided to just randomly go outside and watch this congressional hearing in my hammock, and had I not walked out at the exact moment it was passing, I wouldn't have thought to keep looking. Just like a really weird coincidence of like perfect events. Now, if I was crazy, I'd say, "Oh wow, they're documenting me. Like they're not even hiding anymore. Google's out to get me." Right? But I don't. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool coincidence. But in researching this, I'm like, I wonder if there is any statistics I can find. Like, what's the best date to see something, right? Or what's the best time? And it's kind of like isolating it. Like, what are the best times to best dates to see it in the Pittsburgh area? And I got some dates, and none of those dates were coming up. Like, it was July 26th. I think one was like July 4th, which I just met, and then missed rather January 1st, October 1st. So it was a ways away. So like, well, I wonder if there's any time. And it was like 9:30 to 11:30. And I was like, okay, well, I can experience that every day. And I was, researching like UFO Reddit, and somebody also had asked, like, how can I increase my chances? And somebody replied with, I think, verbatim, if you watch this video, it won't hurt your chances. And I was like, that's really strangely written. I'm going to check that out. And this is where it gets wild. So apparently there is a program called the CE5 program. And it's actually created by this that ologist that I had mentioned before about that spiritual, like the connection. Apparently, he has found frequencies to play, to meditate to, and that increases the chances of connecting. And I was like, that's interesting. Because I was already planning on, trying to, like just staring at the sky and trying to increase my chances. And it's funny because whenever I became a pro wrestler, I was on the road a lot more late at night, and I had no sightings. And I even like vocalized this to some of my buddies. I was like, why am I not seeing anything? Seeing shooting stars, but like, I think because I was like stressing to look, I wasn't seeing anything. I wasn't allowing myself to relax, so to speak. And I will touch on that link. I don't want to gatekeep. I will jump to that. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll give this a go. And I don't know how to meditate or anything like that. So I'm just like, I go and I lay out on my deck and I play this frequency. And it's a really like bizarre sound. It's like imagine like a cartoony sci-fi like satellite dish, like really like bizarre. And it's kind of like spooky. So I'm playing it just for my phone, and my partner, she was like, "Are they supposed to hear this? Like, I don't get it." And I was like, "I don't know, but we can't think within Earth limitations. Like, I know if I'm playing this, trying to contact a helicopter, they're not going to hear me because that's an Earth limitation. These things are not restricted to Earth limitations." So she's like, "Okay, I guess that makes sense." And we had gone out at like 9:30, and we weren't really seeing anything. And it was about like 9:45. I had her, and I was like, "Why don't you play it on your phone as well?" And I started to notice a lot of satellites. And I was pointing out, I'm like, "Oh, look, there's a jet. Like, you can see how it's a jet." I'm like, "Oh, there's a satellite." And it seemed like whenever we were both playing it, it was almost like bugs to a bug zapper. Like, there was an increase in satellites. And I know we have a lot, and that could just be a coincidence. But at one point, this is where it gets wild. At one point, I'm laying down. So imagine like laying down and looking straight up. I see a satellite going from like 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And I'm pointing it out because I've been pointing them all out to her. I'm like, "Oh, look, a satellite." And as she says that, it disappears. And I was like, that's really weird. But the first thing to do when you see something unexplainable is try to debunk it within these Earth limitations. So maybe there's a cloud that I don't see. So I'm looking, like in the flight path, and I see some stars. So I know for sure there are no clouds in this area. So I'm looking and looking and looking and thinking about the speed it was going, and it never showed up, and it should have, pretty quickly. And I was like, that's really interesting, but I can't say it was anything out of this world because, I don't really have the proof. So then, for some reason, we decided to turn our bodies 90 degrees that we were laying down, and a satellite, and it's really weird because they appear like, when you're constantly like looking all around, like you don't see one coming a ways away. I've seen the International Space Station and you could see it coming. I've seen the Starlink satellites coming my way. These satellites just appear, but it looks like are you getting ready to say something?
No, I'm good. I'm good. Go for it.
Yeah, you're getting ready to say something. But so like these satellites like just appear out of nowhere, and this one was going from like 9 o'clock to like 3 o'clock, so like literally from left to right. And I was like, "Oh look, there's a satellite," and I was like, "I wonder if that's something odd." And I turn on my flashlight app on my phone, and I like shake it, like I wave, like pretty obviously like wave to it, and then what we were looking at got really, really, really bright and really, really, really big, and then faded into nothing. I was like, what was that? Because it didn't do that until I signaled it, right? And I was like, that was bizarre. I can't think of anything that does that. And it was really weird because the light getting brighter, it was like there was like motion to it. The best way I can explain it is if you've ever looked through a microscope and you're changing the lens, you can visually see, the lens switching. This literally looked like it had like an up and to the right motion as it got brighter. Like something was almost like in the way. I don't know. Like it was really bizarre. Like I could see it had motion to it. Then it vanished. And I looked and I was like, what was that? That was cool. And like I got like this. I don't even think I said like what was that. I think I knew like that was insane. Like I don't know what that could be. Like that was something out of this world. And then she was like, I don't know. Like that was like because she doesn't know. Like she's open to it, but she hasn't seen anything otherworldly. But then another anomaly. At this point, I'm calling them anomalies because it's just what they're doing. Appears at the 2 o'clock point in the sky and is now traveling towards 7 o'clock. So this one is actually going right to left now in the sky. It's different. And also keep in mind, none of these are on the same flight paths. You got the one going like diagonally, you got the one going straight across, now you got the one kind of going diagonally the other way. So it's not the same thing we're seeing. And it's actually coincidentally like right over my house. I'm like, oh, look, there's another one. And then I was like, here, put on your flashlight. And we wave back and it does the same thing. It gets really, really, really bright and really, really big and then vanishes into nothing. What in the world was that? And then, like, we couldn't believe it. Like, it was like, yeah, like we wanted to see something, but we didn't really expect to see something, right? And to see something so out of this world that was almost like an intelligent response, it felt like, because it reacted to us shining the flashlight. And you could think, like, from a vertical standpoint, maybe looking down and you see a light come out of nowhere. The only way you could really reply back is by shining a light back. So it felt like it was an intelligent response. Now, whether the light got brighter, I thought it got brighter. I don't know if it illuminated the ground around us like a spotlight. I don't know. But then, like, explaining this, I also don't know if it didn't actually get brighter, but it got closer. Because it could have been really, really far away, so it looked smaller. And then in the moment, it could have zipped real close to us to get a better look. And because it was closer to us, it looked brighter and bigger. And that, just thinking about that really blew my mind. Um, Now, I haven't seen something that out of this world since then. I feel that that was kind of a what's going on here? Like we're making a disturbance, so to speak. Um, you have an abandoned house that nobody lives in, and all of a sudden, there's a concert going on in it. You're going to be like, "What the hell is going on?" That's kind of like how I felt whatever these NHI are, for all intents and purposes, this area hasn't been making any sound, any sort of contact, and it's like we need to check this out. And that's kind of the best way I kind of think about that. But from that point on, we and just myself alone experienced things like the next weekend we drove an hour away to a dark area to see the sky and to try it, and we're laying down and we're playing it, and I see a flashbulb in the sky that, from what I hear, is a very common thing, almost like a camera flash going off. But she didn't see it, so I can't say for certain, I have undeniable proof that someone can back me up that they saw it. So that's just kind of like an asterisk that, hey, yeah, I may have seen something. But then with the cops, they're like, hey, the park's actually closed. You guys got to get going. Oh, bitch, we just drove an hour out here. So we drive home, and once again, we drove within the 9:30 to 11:30 window, just for the sake of it. So we drove home. It was an hour back home. So at this point, it's probably around 11 o'clock. Well, all right, well, I'll take the dog on a walk. I'm taking the dog on the walk on my usual path. And Pittsburgh has a ton of hills because we're in the Appalachian Mountains. And so there's some points where, for context, my second floor is parallel with the back alley, where my first floor is the cellar. It's you have to walk down the steps to get into my first floor. It's so bizarre, but because we're on a hill. But there's one area where it's a straight shot and I can see downtown Pittsburgh. So literally the horizon is it's like looking at the ocean, just straight ahead. It's just open sky. And I see something in a small area between two trees. And at this point, I've also downloaded a flight tracker radar and a constellation identifier thing, just because I want to debunk what I'm seeing. So I know, hey, that's nothing, right? So I'm walking, and in this small area where there's one tree on the right side of the road and one tree on the left side of the road, and they're overlapping the street. There's one area where there's open sky, and I see a orangish light traveling pretty slowly from the left side of my vision of my view to the right side. I'm like, I wonder. I'm like, that looks really weird because it's not blinking like a plane, but it's not as far away as a satellite. That's really strange looking. And I pull up my flight tracker app, and as I grab my phone, it vanishes right before my eyes. I went, I can't believe that just happened, because it didn't, I'm watching it move and it disappeared like a candle being blown out. And I was like, that was really, really wild. So I pull up the flight tracker app, and there's no notifications of anything being in that area. And it definitely didn't go behind the other tree. I watched it vanish. Well, fast forward no more than 5 minutes later, so I was walking towards this area, and I walked down this hill, and there's a little curve. And for some reason, I stopped walking, and I turned to my right, and right above my head, probably a little bit, not directly up, but a little bit of ways away, I could see it, was a orange anomaly that had a red light blinking on it so fast. I've never, the best way I can explain it is it was making a merry-go-round. It looked like it was maybe blinking and spinning around it,
from a gravitron,
yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if there was one light or if there was multiple that I was seeing, but it looked like it had spinning motion to it, and it was a red light, and there was an orange anomaly, and it was blinking so fast that imagine a ceiling fan on its highest setting, how you could see it's moving, but you can't really see each individual blade. I could see there was motion to it. but I couldn't identify how many I was looking at. And I think, oh, I'm sorry. So the first anomaly that I'd seen, I was actually trying to pull out my camera to take a picture to show someone like, oh, this is weird. And that's when it vanished. So the second time that I'm seeing this thing pretty close to me, that's when I pull up the flight tracker app and I aim it up at it and it disappears right before my eyes. Now, what's wild about that is we had played this frequency an hour and a half prior and didn't really see anything. But it wasn't until I was by myself and I wasn't looking to see anything that I saw two things. And also, the more that I think about it, the more I'm open to the idea of, I think I walked underneath the first one that I saw, because the area, like I was walking that direction, and it was kind of like when I stopped and turned, it was kind of behind me. So I think it was like a lot closer to me than I realized. But because we don't know how big they are and we see the sky background, we assume they're, really, really far away. But what's to say they're not actually like soccer ball size and they're in our atmosphere? We don't know. But it was really weird because I couldn't believe what I saw. And I just had two experiences that I'd never experienced before. And there was something so there was a characteristic to them that I could tell was weird. And I had the rest of my walk to kind of process how to put this into words. And it still doesn't make any sense with me explaining this, because it's more of a, once you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. They float. And I know that doesn't make any sense, because how can I tell what's in the sky, what's floating, and what's flying, right? It felt like there was nothing, no resistance to these things whatsoever. Where if you were to put a leaf in a creek and watch that leaf, run with the creek, floating on the water, there's still more surface tension from that leaf on that water than there was any sort of tension with these anomalies in our atmosphere. And that's when I kind of really started to open the idea up to interdimensional, because from what I gather, if we were to see something from another dimension, we would only comprehend it as far as the 3D world would allow it. Like, there's a crazy video that kind of explains it on YouTube that I'll send you, because it's genuinely interesting how to kind of visualize it. But so if you're on a 2D world, like, you'll see a circle. If you're a stick figure, you'll see a circle. If you're still that stick figure and somebody from the 3D world puts a sphere on it, well, the surface that you can comprehend is still that two-dimensional world. So you won't see the whole sphere. You'll simply see the contact point from that 3D world onto that 2D world, which would still just look like a circle because the bottom of the sphere is round. So the fourth dimension, in theory, would be something very similar, where there would be something else that we aren't seeing the whole picture. We're just seeing what we could. And I was on the phone with my buddy trying to explain this in a way that he could understand. And I first of all, I love the graphic you made, by the way. The more I look at it, the more I see kind of more hidden things.
I just had fun with it. I was like, hey, let's let people know what it is, what they watch it on demand and stuff like that. This is what it is, right?
I appreciate it. The best way to explain it is these things are .png images and we are .jpegs. Like, if you're in Photoshop, there's different layers, but even still from the creator, you can put that, that whatever it is on top of that other thing, but not like compress it together. I don't know what that term is. Merge it together. But even then you can move it, right? Because it's not merged together. But if you don't know you have that capability and you're just viewing it as a picture, you won't know as somebody else that we as a as a photo editor, can move that layer around. And that's the best way to explain it, is we are within that JPEG, background world, where these things are raster images, or vector images. And it's so bizarre just to comprehend that. And I won't hog you up, and I will get back to that question. I'm more than willing to send all of my experiences to anybody who wants it. I just have to kind of like redact some things because I wrote it for my memory's sake. So there's a lot of like first names, like, oh, I was with such and such. And that's it. There's so many experiences that it's like so much of a hassle to kind of edit that. But I'm more than willing to share that with anybody. But somebody said in the question, asking about the web, that frequency thing.
The link, or
yeah. I need the link. That would have been to the frequency that I was talking about, and I kind of hesitated on that. From what I am to believe, this frequency, which also keep in mind, I would also put out that every time that I played it with somebody, family members, like one time was just with one brother, one was with another brother, one was with my dad, I've seen things every time. I have a 100% success rate. I don't know if that's because they're attracted to me, or if it's, kind of like a beacon that they're responding to. But we don't know what we are opening ourselves up to. And that's something that's kind of disturbing to think about. That the same thing in like a Ouija board. You don't know what you're opening yourself up to. Could be good spirits, could be very bad entities. And we're essentially playing with a sandbox that we don't know the rules about. And that's one of the things that, like, if somebody really desperate, really 100% is willing to accept, the risks, I will send it to them. I would feel bad as a person if it affected somebody, whether physically or mentally or spiritually or whatever, right? Because in addition to all of this, I have been waking up in the middle of the night, every night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., absolutely terrified. Absolutely 100% terrified, on the verge of tears, for no reason. I'm not having nightmares. If I am, I'm not remembering them. There is such a primal fear that I am experiencing every night since then. My coworker thinks that I'm actually being abducted, because when people get abducted, they don't remember anything. I don't think so, because the experiences that I've heard, there's a little bit of, I saw a craft, and then I saw this, and then everything was a blur. I'm not experiencing any of that on a first contact basis. So I don't think that's happening. I think subconsciously, this phenomenon is very scary. And consciously, I'm not admitting that, like, I'm genuinely not afraid of this, right? But deep down, this goes against everything we're told it to be true, right? So you swim in the ocean and there could be a shark, right? Well, the more you think about it, the more freaked out you're going to get, So it's just best to be in the ocean and not really think about it. Now, that being said, while doing this and experiencing these, I don't know if these sharks are hungry, like, I don't know. I would like to think they're benevolent, but I can't deny the fact that I am experiencing these very, very terrible fears in the middle of the night. And actually, the other night, had the scariest experience I've ever had since, in my life, essentially. I was walking my dog yet again, and I was walking past the hill, like a house, like had a hill that you can take steps up, and there's an area where there's just grass, and then there's like a tree line, and I could even send you the picture of this to kind of like visualize this. as I'm walking past it, just, nothing's going on. A anomaly shoots up or appears, I don't know, no more than 3 feet away from me at eye level. And it looked, this is so funny because what my wrestling persona is, it looked like a goddamn flame out of nowhere. It was bright orange, and it had the characteristics of one of those red embers that float away if you're having a fire, right? It's just kind of in and out, but it was like big, and it was like it wasn't like a little red ember. It was like a full blown flame, and that's the best way I can explain it. The characteristics of it, kind of like I got chills now talking about it, and it scared me because I didn't expect it. And as explaining to somebody, it looked like it jumped up from there was like a bunch of like overgrown grass. There's like flowers on the top. It looked like it shot up from there, and it waited until that exact moment where I was there, because it was like right to the right of me, like in my corner of my eye. And it's a completely dark background. Like there's nothing there that would have caused that. And I even inspected the next day, seeing if there was any sort of like reflector thing that someone may put in their like driveway so they know where to stop, backing up. There was nothing there. And it really freaked me out, because I mean, even if a bird would have flown up in that moment when you're not expecting it, like that would startle you, right? But then it's something that you can't comprehend, and now they're getting significantly closer to me. Like I could have reached out and touched it, and it really freaked me out because it was such a real thing. And that's the thing I cannot reiterate enough is these things are real. And everything I'm taught to believe is telling me they're not real, but they are as real as you and I, Tony. Like, I'm completely sound of mind. I'm not hallucinating. I've never hallucinated in my life. I can't even really comprehend hallucinating. Like, that's a whole foreign thing to me. It's like, do they actually see something, or are they thinking? Like, I am seeing these things that are as real as anything I've ever seen in my life. And they're getting closer to me. And I even like texted my dad, and I kind of like just like beat around the bush, and I was like, hey, can you like just kind of like give me like pray for me a little bit, because I don't know what I'm dealing with, and it's becoming a lot more unnerving. And that's when I kind of confessed to him that I'm dealing with these, night terrors, essentially, where this primal fear of just like there's nothing. Like I'm not even paralyzed. Like I've experienced sleep paralysis. It's just waking up in the middle of the night as if a bomb went off, and how scary that would be because you're not expecting it. Like this fear is just so unrational, and it's every night. And so that's another one of the things, like, yes, I will share this link, but please know that we would be dealing with something that we can't comprehend. And if anyone wants it and you're sure, yes, I will send it to you. And I will send all the experiences that I've seen, because it's funny, since reading the document, I actually like reminded myself of experiences that I completely forgot about. Real quickly, the anniversary is actually coming up. We're coming home from a state forest that we go to every year, the second Saturday of October, in West Virginia, because we like watch like the leaves change and stuff like that. And we're driving, and at the tree, like on the other side of the road, there's like a median, and then like the oncoming traffic, there's like a tree line. And I'm in the car with my family, and I see a ball of light shoot up from the ground and disappear. Like as like the entire time it's ascending, like in a straight line, it's like fading. And then once it got so high, it was completely gone. And I was like, what was that? And essentially it was the woods. Like there was no houses around or anything like that. And if there was a house around, like you wouldn't do like The only thing I can think of is maybe it was a firework, but it didn't have any characteristics of a firework, right? But I'm trying to
Fireworks
wrap
very distinguishable, right?
exactly. But not only that, you wouldn't light a firework in this area, and there wasn't any civilization. Like, it's a state forest, and I kind of like it was so fast that I couldn't really comprehend it. And I'm riding in the car. I think we took my family's van down. I'm riding right behind the driver, and then behind me is my brother. And he goes, "I just saw," and I was like, "You saw that too?" And like, it was so bizarre. Yet we just forgot all about it because I guess it was like there was no way to debunk what we saw or even research it. Um, so we just completely like let it go. And that's fascinating to think about, like how frequently I've experienced things that I could just let something go. But what I know now is I think when we saw a UAP that night, because it wasn't the traditional flying saucer, we didn't think anything of it. And I think, could have been, within that spirit realm, because there are reports of these UAPs coming out from the ocean and descending into the ocean. And there's videos of them like going into solid mass, which once again, if they are within a dimension that we can't comprehend, that would explain the lack of inertia and lack of force or any sort of thing. I think we saw something like that. Now, whether it wanted to show itself to us, whether it thought it was, I don't know. Maybe it was an accident. I don't know. But it's funny because like now I'm able to look back and like, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot all about that. But so yeah, and it's funny to think about like all the crazy other sightings I have that I haven't even like like even touched base on. Like I also saw this and I also saw this, but we got to leave it for part 3, right?
Right. It's funny. I was actually telling my wife tonight, because you met her at the show,
Right.
when we did the interview, and I said, you know what, I feel like this podcast is going to go long. She's like, do you think there's going to be a part 3? I'm like, there probably will be at some point, because I was like, I told him, yeah, 2 hours max. Let's say, because I got to go to bed.
Right.
I got to get up in the morning. But
Yeah, right.
no,
Yeah,
no, but it's interesting, just all the stuff, because it's like, like I find it weird when people doubt people that have had experiences just because
right.
they've never had experiences, because I've never
Right.
had an experience. But I mean,
Right.
the closest thing that I've ever seen was like when we were in Savannah on like one of those ghost walking tours, and they tell you to hold your phone up. We were out in front of like a cemetery, and like you put your phone up, and there was one time where you could see like a blue light in your phone,
Oh,
but like you couldn't visualize it with your eye.
weird.
And it was
Yeah.
just something, just weird. It's like, is it just a reflection off your camera? Is it this or that? But it's really weird that like some people weren't seeing it, some people were,
Right.
in your phone, and you're all looking at the exact same spot. I mean, that's just one of those things. But like,
Holy shit. I'm sorry to interrupt. I caught one on video and I will send that to you. I couldn't believe I caught because I've since learned that whenever they appear and I even think that, hey, I should record this, they disappear. So I think there's some sort of, they know the phone is a way for me to capture them. And I think they may know when I'm thinking about that. And I couldn't believe that I caught it on film and it vanished. And like it was going right to left. And I started recording and it didn't vanish. I was like, holy shit. Like I was like shaking. I couldn't believe it. And like there was like a street light in the shot and I started walking towards it and it started like kind of flying away from me. And then it vanished. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I caught that on video. And I was like watching it on the screen to verify that it was on my screen. But then watching it, like you can see how erratically it's moving. And it literally stops at one point and then continues and then vanishes. But that's the type of thing. Like I'm experiencing it so frequently that I'm literally forgetting about otherworldly experiences. I'm sorry, continue.
no, it's one of those weird things because, with technology nowadays, right, we don't see as many like UFO captures as there were like back in the 80s or whatever. And
Right.
it just kind of like sparked a thing in my mind when we were out in Utah, right? So we went out to a national forest out there, with it was like the big super moon was the same night out there. We went
Oh,
out to watch
wow.
the super moon, right? It was amazing, right? But like you could see all the stars in the sky, right? It was just
Yeah.
popping. It
Oh,
was
wow.
beautiful. It was amazing, right? But at the same time, you're using your phone and you're not really getting good pictures or videos
Right.
of what's going out there. But yet, with a video camera or something like that, you can capture those
Yeah.
better moments. And yet, the phone, when you film a lot, is better than a lot of old cameras that used to
Right.
capture
Right.
stuff or even film for TV. And maybe it is something with like the magnetics in the phone or something like that that just
I,
it just
I think I think it's sorry to cut you off. I think there's a like a legit scientific reason. Like a analog zoom is a lot better than a digital zoom. And now that we have smartphones, we use digital zooms. And then especially with like how far away things and the light exposure and stuff like that. Like it's hard, like you can take a picture of a supermoon, right? And it never appears as good as it is in real
it
life,
looks like
right? And that's
crap, and you're like, why?
right.
Why?
You're like, oh, I promise it's a lot more crazy looking than that, right? So you have that to begin with. But I legitimately think these phenomenon can tell when they are vulnerable of some capacity. And who's to say that when our technology improved that could capture these things, that they didn't also improve to stop from being captured? And like I realize how conspiracy theory that sounds because every conspiracy has like a way to debunk any sort of doubt, right? Like the theory of like the most venomous spider is like the common daddy long leg, and it's like, well, wait a second, why don't more people die from it? And then like they say, well, because their fangs are too small to puncture their skin, and it's like, oh, you know what? That sounds believable. That's probably right. But it turns out that that's not true, and daddy longleggers aren't even like technically spiders. Like a good conspiracy has a way to counter debunks. And I realize how crazy it sounds to say when I pull out my camera or even think to take a picture, they vanish. It's like, yeah, my buddy unlocked Ermac in Mortal Kombat 1, but he goes to another school, so I can't teach you how to do it, right? It sounds like that, and I realize that. And and it's funny because like this is the first time I've ever really publicly spoken about this because there is still some sort of stigma to it, and like you said, a lot of people just kind of doubt because they don't experience things. And I wish I could show people what I've seen and experience what I've seen in a safe way, so to speak. Because like once I mean, someone could argue, well, he's gaining like attention from this from doing this podcast, right? But like we were talking about this anyway, right? Like I'm not saying like, oh, I need the 5 minutes of fame going on Tony's podcast and lying about UFOs, right? Like I legit have nothing to gain from this. If anything, whenever somebody comes forward about an experience, they have more to lose because of the stigma of it all. And it's it's funny because of that, I've kind of found myself doubting other people's experiences. And I have to stop and say, wait a second, who am I to doubt this person? Because I know what I experienced was as real as a bird in the sky or a fish in the creek. I know that. Who am I to say that their experience was more fake than mine? And that's a really wild concept and a kind of scary one, because of the abduction things. And like I've heard good stories of like a peaceful abduction. I've heard terrifying things, and I've also heard the more you research abductions, the more likely you are to connect and experience it. So I try not to read too much about it, but I also kind of want to experience it. Like if I could experience it on a first contact basis and like be okay, I would totally do it. And I even like I think it's funny because the one time I had my dad come over and we played this frequency, as he was leaving, he stopped walking, he paused, and he went, "Just promise me one thing. If they ask you to go with them, please don't go." And he was like so serious, with like a hint of like fear and sadness in his voice, and how it kind of like put it into perspective of like he really believes me, and that is a valuable thing to have with this phenomenon where, like, I talked to my mom about it and she's like, it's not real. It's blah, 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 blah. How do you know it's not a satellite? Right? Like, she just, because it kind of goes against her religious beliefs. So she's like, she can't comprehend anything that goes against that. But, I'm sorry, I got on a tangent and I lost my train of thought where I was going with that. Um, yeah, I completely lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Well, let me throw out a question, because it's one of those great mysteries. You know, Area 51, like, what could possibly be down? I mean, there's obviously something going on down there. Do you believe it's just
Yeah.
military? Do you believe it's aliens?
Well,
A little bit mix of both?
that's a fascinating question, because for the longest time growing up, even when I was experiencing things at a younger age and the stigma of it all, that I would, like, if I saw something that I couldn't explain, I would say, well, it's a UFO. And then my instinct would be, oh, well, UFOs are military based, right? Like, just, I had to limit it within Earth limitations just to kind of comprehend it for my own sake. Until I don't know if I read this, this counterpoint or whatever, or if I came up with it myself, but there's documented evidence of unidentified flying objects back in World War II, that before they even had that term UFO, they were called Foo Fighters, like military documented evidence from World War II, right? So they've been here since at least the 1940s. Now, so they've said that these things in the sky were doing things that we can't do, like doing maneuvers and stuff like that. If that was military tech that we had secretly back in the 40s, I believe it's been long enough that that would be the status quo. Why would we not utilize that technology? Why would we still be experiencing, turbulence on a jet? We would have made that the standard. And not only that, but saying that people have been seeing them, descending from, 80,000 feet, which is, technically space, or ascending up to space, with no inertia whatsoever. Why do we still spend millions of dollars on rocket ships if we have that technology to do that? Why do we put astronauts at risk of, rockets exploding? Like, SpaceX just had a rocket explode. And what was it? The Space Shuttle Challenger or Columbia exploded live on TV, and the whole crew died. And that would have been after, this documented Foo Fighter technology. I think, thinking about it like that, it's just, that alone shows to me that they are not our product, whether our being American or even an adversary in, like, Russia or Japan back then. I don't think those were, like, that just proves that it was not Earth technology. But even still today, Navy pilots and Air Force pilots are still interacting with UAP, the UAP phenomenon. And one of the whistleblowers, Ryan Graves, it's funny how everyone's giving, like, David Grush, like, which, first of all, I just learned he's from Pittsburgh, so shout out to my fellow Pittsburgher. Ryan, like, they kind of give him a hard time because he's, like, the main guy and he hasn't had any evidence himself. He hasn't seen anything himself. Or they're like, well, he hasn't even seen anything himself. But they don't realize that, like, he's the guy for the other people to report to so they can remain anonymous and keep their flight clearance. Like, he's the fall guy intentionally. And not only that, but he was appointed this military position from our own government. So even our government said, this is the guy. So we're either to believe this guy is not, I'm sorry. They also, like, somebody brought up that, he was diagnosed with PTSD, and it's like kind of to discredit him, which, first of all, how dare you discredit a soldier from PTSD from fighting in Iraq to try to, say, oh yeah, well, this guy's, out of his mind, which, first of all, he was diagnosed with depression, which, as far as I know, hallucinations aren't, a side of depression. But anyway, at the time, the military thought there's no need to pull his clearances. Like, they didn't see any sort of risk of this gentleman who was diagnosed with PTSD and got help. They kept his position, which says a ton about how good of a guy this is, right? Like, they felt confident enough to not pull his clearance. Where, if somebody, from what I gather, like if somebody high up is caught like smoking weed, like they'll lose their clearance because the argument is they are not of sound mind. Even though I, as a straight edge guy, I think marijuana should be legalized. It's a whole other thing. But Ryan Graves, who was at the hearing, is. So if you say, "Oh, I don't believe David Grush because he hasn't seen anything," and you refuse to look into who he is and what his title is, okay, fine, let's say that Ryan Graves was sitting right to his side, and he himself was a fighter pilot that interacted with the UAP phenomenon, a first-hand experience. And at the congressional hearing, one of the Congress members asked Mr. Graves if it was possible that it was an adversary or one of our own tech up there with them, and maybe a project that they didn't have clearance on and they didn't know. And Mr. Graves said that from a logic standpoint, it doesn't make sense to test any sort of aircraft as close to these $1 million jets as these things were. Like, if you just wouldn't test, like we have test ranges for stuff like that, and you wouldn't put anybody else at risk, and you wouldn't put $1 million jet at risk. And that's the whole thing that kind of came of this, is like these Navy pilots are seeing these things, and they run the risk of either crashing and dying or ejecting and crashing $1 million plane and then having to go to court about it. And what can they say? "I'm sorry, I ejected this plane, but there was a UFO." Well, then they're going to get their flight clearance pulled. And it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And that was really the catalyst behind, hey, these things are real, and we need to acknowledge them for our safety. And not only that, but commercial pilots are also seeing this phenomenon as well. And like, so I don't. Long answer to a short question: I don't think they are secret military tech. I did for the longest time. I do think Area 51 tests new things that may be man-made, but I also think that a lot of the stuff that we have might not have been 100% organically learned from Earth. I think we have probably learned some things from these NHI. And tinfoil hat time, I can't prove this. It's a fun theory to think about, because when you're on the road and you're driving show to show, I mean, you bounce off of ideas, and you're in your own head, and you pitch, talk to people, and when you're listening to podcasts and stuff, I think it's a bit odd that while we're having this talk of disclosure of UAP and NHI, and the Navy has flat out, admitted they don't know what they are, I think it's interesting that at that same time, we're also getting introduced to artificial intelligence. That's a bit strange that we are experiencing something so unlike any sort of technology we have and have had at this point. The same exact time, we're becoming more open to the idea of otherworldly tech. Like, I wonder if that's connected. I can't prove it. Interesting to think about. And what if it's not learned from NHI, what if AI was created to fly these things because we know as humans, our bodies wouldn't be able to handle it, but an intelligent source, and not a drone, mind you, because an AI would be able to react a lot more quickly than a drone, than somebody on the ground using a remote control. What if AI was created to fly these things? Can't say it's true. Can't say it's not true. Just a fun theory to think about. So yeah, like, there's so many rabbit holes you can go down, just like all these possibilities, and it's almost heartbreaking to see so many people closing their mind to the possibilities of these, and And I told my loved ones, and I even spoke to my therapist about this. I realize this is a dangerous rabbit hole, a dangerous cliff to stand on, because the moment you start thinking and, tampering with this and opening yourself up to this, the more you'll find yourselves in more of a they're out to get us type mentality, like don't trust them because of this. And then if you're saying, oh, they're lying to you about this, then you can fall into they're lying to you about that, right? And that's dangerous. And I realized that could actually be diagnosed at a mental disorder at that point, whenever you're that paranoid and that distrusting. And but who's to say that the guy down the street that's saying that they're putting toxins in our water, who's to say that he actually isn't on to something, right? I don't want to explore that, because I see nothing good from coming from that, that unhealthy distrust for, you know, governing officials and stuff. Not that I'm saying that we should go and believe everything, right? It's good to have skepticism, and that's essentially what I'm saying. Is it's heartbreaking to see where people don't even allow themselves to have any sort of skepticism whatsoever. Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of those. And it's funny because people think that he's actually paid off to kind of discredit him. That's what I'm saying, how easy it is to kind of fall down that rabbit hole. Where he's someone's yeah, we're saying these aren't government, made, and we don't know what they are. What do you think they are? And Neil, as a scientist, said, I don't know what they are, and I'll leave it at that. The whole point of science is to explore the unknown. How can you, as a scientist, not be motivated by curiosity to want to learn more? That's just so mind-boggling to me. This is what science is based on, learning and exploring. And we're literally on the brink of experiencing and learning something that our ancestors could never have comprehended. And you just write it off, they're unknown. I don't care to find out. That is so mind-boggling to me. I can't comprehend that, especially with his level. It's one thing for my mom. I can say, oh, fine, you don't want to get into it, no big deal. But I think it's healthy to have some sort of skepticism. And if somebody doesn't believe me, that's okay. I'm okay with somebody that I don't know that doesn't believe me. I would like it if somebody believed me, but skepticism is good to have. And I only have so much proof that I can provide. And I do have a couple of videos that I can show you, that I'll send to you, that it basically is as good as I have. And I realize that it could be, someone say, oh, well, that's that, whatever. And it's not the proof they want. Because there's also a Goldilocks zone with this. If someone provides a picture of something and it's too clear, well, clearly it's fake. And if someone provides a picture of something and it's too blurry, clearly it's fake, right? You always have those people that can discredit it one way or the other. There's no Goldilocks zone for the perfect image of proof. So I get it. People can see what I'm saying, the proof that I have. They can say either one of those, right? But I think it's healthy to have skepticism. So, but yeah, there's a lot more that we could talk about on episode 3.
I'm a huge movie guy and I love aliens and all this other stuff. And of all the movies that have ever been made and you can talk, I love Transformers. They come from a different planet, right?
Right.
Mars Attacks, Aliens, all this stuff. World of Worlds, Independence Day. Of all the things out there, this is just a fun question. You don't have to take it serious or anything like that. But of all the things that I've ever made, what would you think most resembles maybe the thing that we would see first from anything in pop culture that we've seen alien related?
That's a great question. You mean as far as a scenario, War of the Worlds, Doomsday scenario, or a third counters, whatever Steven Spielberg? Are you saying which scenario I see first?
Yeah, if anything was to happen first here, what do you think would happen first of anything that's ever been put out there?
Man, that's hard to say. Because admittedly, like as much as I like sci-fi, um, I honestly don't think there is an accurate representation of what I believe. Um, like I said earlier, I touched on it earlier that I think these beings have the potential to wipe us out, so they could have at any moment. And like most, I think like all the movies we just talked about have all been like doomsday stuff. Um, I don't really have the good answer for that. I genuinely believe these entities, for the most part, are peaceful, of some capacity. Now, keep in mind, we know for the most part humans are peaceful, but to the cows on the farm, they probably don't trust humans at all because they know what happens to the cattle that are big, right? So, on that comprehension, that could be a scenario too, like they could be acting on a whole other realm where they are peaceful, but there could be some things that we deem as not peaceful for our sake. But like I think for the most part everything's peaceful, so I don't really have a more clear cut answer on that. However, I do believe there is not more than one. I think there are multiple entities out there. Um,
Which would make
whether
sense
they're
because look at all the creatures on Earth, right? We're
yeah,
not all the
exactly.
same. So if we took
Right,
an arc to another planet, right? There's obviously
right.
a variety of creatures, and
And
I
they, and then you even think like even just like as a planet alone, how many creatures there are on one planet. To think about how many planets there are, I think there could be multiple levels of intelligence. I heard a theory. Tom DeLonge is really, he was actually his name was dropped at Congress for how much he really was a figurehead of all this. And it's funny because you're like, oh, he's just a rock star. What does he know? And I think he's told some things um, that's true from higher up on the totem pole. And I also think he's told a lot of not true things as to kind of, because if he's saying everything is true and it turns out to be true, then it's like that's almost like too much power for one man. And if they're not wanting all that information to get out, you tell three lies and the truth, right? So then it's easy to kind of like, I think there's been a lot of soft disclosure. I honestly thought that's what you were going to ask me with that question. I think Hollywood plays a huge part. I think they might know a little bit more. I think Steven Spielberg knows more than he's letting on. I think James Cameron might know more than he's letting on. I don't think he knows that he knows more than he's letting on, type of thing. Like someone might give him an idea and he might not realize that that person knows, type of thing. But I think Tom DeLonge of Blink 182. I don't know if you know that.
yeah, I know, yeah.
Um, he's put out some things. There was an interesting podcast where he's like specifically like there's beings that look just like humans, they're just a little bit taller. There's beings that look like animals. There are beings that are literally just balls of light that consume energy. Like there's so many different scenarios of entities. There's non-intelligent entities. Like the options are, and the possibilities are absolutely endless. I think the amount of stars there are in the sky should be multiplied by that's how many possibilities there are, and we don't know how many stars there are. So today they're supposed to still with Keanu. I do believe that they might be some sort of peaceful protectors of some sort. I think this is actually their planet, and we're just here. Because there's been an increase of NHI and UAP activity around nuclear sites, where there's actually been documented reports of like UAPs dismantling fighter jets, even not in active combat, just being too close. Like it's essentially been like an EMP for all of its data and sensors went offline. And there's also been documents of nuclear warheads essentially being disabled around the same time UAP has been nearby. So I think they don't like conflict, and I think they know nuclear war would be catastrophic and could destroy their planet. And it also could be affecting them on the next dimension realm. Like it could be something that is so much bigger, like that, toxic waste could be traveling to that dimension in a way we can't even comprehend. But I do believe that they are peaceful and want to protect the Earth. Um, but I also think it's also a science project. And that's one of the concepts too that actually is a pretty an upsetting concept to think about is so say you have an ant colony and you're running tests on, let's see how they interact if we only feed them Pepsi, right? You're running an experiment with a control. Well, if you are running this test with that sole purpose, and as a scientist, you lean over and your glasses fall off your face and land on those ants, well, now your whole test is messed up because now you've added a whole different element to this project, right? So you have two options. One, you continue this experiment now with another element added to it to see how they react to this thing in addition to this other test, right? Or those scientists would wipe out that project and start over. And that's a scenario that could happen. And I'm not a doomsday guy. I'm not, oh, the world's ending, right? I was open to the idea of the 2012 world ending because I heard about it so long ago, probably in like 1998, and it kind of like stuck with me. But I don't think we're on that track, but that is a possibility. You know, like we could be a science project. And another theory I had is what if we constantly get so far in advancements, like technology advances so much, but they're testing our psyche, our mental. We are not at that rate where they want us to be, but our technology has, lapped us, and they feel we're not worthy of that, and we do a hard reset and start all over again. Because with the little bit of knowledge that we would influence the past. So that's how you have those random artifacts in the desert that you can see that we know have conducted electricity thousands of years before we even discovered electricity. It would explain where these artifacts are coming from because we have the knowledge of us, that we had before, that reset, so to speak. That's a possibility. We don't know. But yes, I promise I'm not as doomsday as these scenarios sound. I genuinely believe they are here to protect the Earth. And also, I feel like a lot of people want them to. It's, the people in charge of destroying this planet are not listening, and they're not being held accountable for the climate change that we are experiencing. And the world that we leave our children and our children's children is not going to be the same world that we have right now, and it's going to be much worse. And we're bringing attention to that, and the corporations that are poisoning this planet and the deforestation, that would upset me if I was an entity on this planet first, or if I was even a test and destroying this in a way that we didn't want the test subjects to do. I would hope that they would come in and intervene in some capacity, and hopefully they intervene in a peaceful way. But I also don't think we should rely on something that isn't proven. But like, oh, well, these NHI, they're gonna clean up our planet for us. Why do we, we'll wash our hands of it? That's unrealistic. I think we have a moral obligation as a intelligent community, intelligent entity, as human beings, to leave the world a better place than we inherited. So I think I'd like to think they're peaceful as well.
Yeah, I think mine would probably be, as far as movie goes, I love the movie They Live with Rowdy Piper. I think it's so cool because how they live amongst us, but I think my favorite, I mean, it's out there, but I also love Mars Attacks. I just love the fact that there could be little green aliens running around. Like I just love the possibility of that, that kind of stuff. And I'd rather take them versus aliens from Aliens or Independence Day or something like that,
But there's also a whole nother theory that I promise we will keep for another day, because I realize we're almost at that 2-hour point. I'm not completely against the scenario of life as we know it being a simulation. And that's something that I never comprehended. I thought that was all hocus pocus. But the more I think about it, the more, like, I can't prove that it's not a simulation. And if anything, the experiences we have in this world kind of imply that it could be a simulation, with the sense of coincidences and synchronicities and strange things happening, out of body experiences, because this is not our true form. Could be plugged in like the Matrix somewhere. We could be video game characters, like, that's entirely possible. And we don't know. And that's something that I've really kind of opened my mind up to. And it's entirely possible, if that's the case, if this is a simulation, these things, these entities could be our gods. And they could be, whatever, like anything is possible. And, to jump back to, people are doing themselves a disservice to not even open their mind up to the possibilities of things. But we'll touch on that for episode 3.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot here, and this podcast has been really, really awesome. I just love the fact that, talking with you and your experiences, which I believe, everybody should be open-minded to the possibilities of something. And like you said, like, even at times you can see how people can be, how you're so skeptical of other people,
Right.
just because you haven't experienced what they experienced. And
Right.
like I told you, like, we went out to the crash site and we're out there and people are saying that they're feeling this energy, whatever. And of course, the first thing you think is, okay, they're weird hippies, they're out there.
Yeah.
But
for sure.
just because they say that they are and we're not, doesn't mean that they're not experiencing it.
Right.
And I think it's always good to leave an open mind and be respectful of other people's beliefs out there as well too. I feel like we all have opinions. As long as it ain't hurt nobody, then I think there's no harm in it. So
exactly.
Shawn Phoenix, this is
real quick before I lose train of thought. It's funny that you mentioned the experiences, because a thing I wanted to touch on is, like, I have that sensation of I can feel them. And I know how crazy that sounds. It's like when I'm laying out there, I get the sensation of being in a room full of people and everyone looking at you, like, that experience, that feeling. And then, like, my hair stands up on end. And then that's when the experiences start happening. And that's another thing we'll touch on. But yeah, I forgot to mention that too. Like, that's something that I've experienced that is a precursor to seeing things. But sorry to cut you off.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's you mentioned some things earlier about, like, I told you that we like to go on ghost tours. We like to go see alien stuff. But the one thing we will not mess with, and that's a Ouija board, because I believe that you can go down a certain pathway. And I feel like the things that we do, the things that I've done, like, I'm not scared of, but like a Ouija board freaks the heck out of me. And it's just not one thing I'm willing to touch with. I stay away from that spirit world.
I don't blame you.
Oh, well, we got to have a part 3 eventually, and I'm sure we'll figure a whole bunch of other topics to come in the future. Shawn Phoenix, you want to tell us a little bit about what you have coming up in your professional wrestling career? Because after all, you are a professional wrestler.
I am professional, right? On top of all that, right? Like, I do have, like, an even crazier life. It's this October's pretty light, actually, just by other things happening on Saturdays. Like, I'm going to that state forest this Saturday, and then going to a concert. I think my only confirmed booking is the 21st up in Massachusetts for Truly Independent Wrestling, where I play a villain. It's really fun. Think like 1999 Chris Jericho, Goofy, having the time of my life doing that. And there's a lot of rookies in the locker room, so I get to be kind of viewed as one of the more experienced and passing on knowledge. I'm having a blast doing that. In addition to that, another thing that I've recently picked up, because if I need more hobbies, right? My buddies and I just started a podcast, which I would like to plug. And I know what you're thinking. A bunch of middle-aged white guys, friends, of course, are going to start a podcast, right? And I hate that we're a statistic. I hate that. I hate that we're a cliche. But it's like a conceptual one. what we are doing is retelling our history in backyard wrestling and what it meant to us. And each episode is a different era, so to speak, with different people involved being guests on the podcast. So, for example, the first episode was in like 2003 when we were wrestling on a trampoline, and then the progress of just goofing around on a trampoline to actually having shows for our family and friends and editing videos and how it grew into what it ended up being. I ended up wrestling in Vancouver, Canada, another country on the other side of the continent, for this hobby, which is wrestling with people on the internet that just so mind blowing to think about that as a hobby, right? I don't want to glorify backyard wrestling, but I did it before I was pro. I don't regret it. I learned a lot about it, and I will touch base on that. The podcast, it's on YouTube. It's actually a video podcast. It's called Golden Triangle Media. We've only got 3 episodes out. It's funny because we actually just jumped the second episode. We went from 38 subscribers to 600 some, and we aren't really advertising it anywhere. This is probably the most advertising we've really done. So I don't know where we're getting these subscribers from, but it's really cool. Being able to connect with my friends, as 30 years old, it's kind of hard to do that. And reflecting on our past, it's kind of giving me a midlife crisis too. At the same time, it's when did we get so old? Such and such is married now in our friend group. Such and such has a kid. When did this happen? We're just watching videos of when we were 16. When did this happen, right? But it's really cool. It's a passion project. Anybody would love to check it out. I can't ask for any tips, advice. Is a whole new thing. We're going into this blind. Anybody that watches it, any critiques, any questions, please feel free to message us on there. We're on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Golden Triangle Media of some capacity. Each channel might be a little bit different. But that's pretty much all I've got. Like I said, I got that one show coming up, got a couple concerts, and got this podcast, and got the Clark Kent life.
Well, that's awesome, man. I can't wait to check out the podcast. I didn't even know that you were doing it because, like you said, you weren't advertising it. It must have got picked up on one of those Reddit things or something like that for backyard wrestling. Somebody posted it, and then all of a sudden you get all the subscribers from it. But that's great, though.
Yeah, it is cool. I'm sorry.
No, and I was gonna say, I love the fact that you're, one of the themes recently on these podcasts and on these interviews is about people talking about don't wait to do something. If you have the idea, go for it. You guys have the idea for the backyard wrestling. You don't want to be 50 and doing it. You're happy to be doing it now, while it's fresh in your guys' mind, and while you can all get together. Because like you said, one day somebody's got 3 kids and they're married and you guys can't do it. So you're doing it while you can. And I do like that. So, and
that's the thing that's really cool too, is being able to get together with my friends that I went to elementary school with, that I grew up with in life, more than just backyard wrestling, but having that connection of something that meant so much to us, and the fact that we are still in each other's lives, I realize is a treat. Not everyone has that opportunity. I know a lot of people don't know where their childhood best friends are up to these days. I can call them up anytime and say, hey, let's go do something. So it's really nice being able to do that as well.
Well, that's awesome. Well, guys, go check out Shawn's podcast, Golden Triangle Media, because I'm definitely going to be checking that one out. I can't wait to hear some of your guys' stories, that's for sure. And, Shawn, it's been definitely a pleasure. I knew this was going to be a long podcast. You warned me, just like the interview before, it was going to be long. But lots of great stuff, lots of interesting stuff. I really loved your stories, I should say, multiple stories that we talked about.
So many more I didn't even touch base on. That's the crazy thing.
Right. And I'm sure by the time we do another one, there'll be even more stories on top of that. But I love the fact that we have this platform where, I know you posted on Instagram that somebody's letting you tell your story of aliens and UFOs. And that's why I started this particular podcast, because we could do the wrestling interviews. We could get the get to know you stuff, but also so many people want to talk about other stuff than just professional wrestling or their trade. And I feel like this is a great platform to do it, right? Because there's no rules. We're just gonna have a good time and talk about it. And it was definitely a pleasure. So
I appreciate
Right.
that, and I also appreciate, just one gentleman, how many times I've answered, "How did you get into wrestling?" Right? I can only answer that so many times and be enthusiastic about it, and that's not to throw shade on anybody. I appreciate anybody taking time to do that. But as far as a personal connection, it's so much more rewarding to be able to shed light on things that aren't necessarily related to wrestling, things that I'm passionate about elsewhere. Uh, it's just really nice to have that. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I hope you stuck with us through this 2 hours. It'll probably take everybody 6 days to watch. That's how I
Yeah,
watch my podcast. And like as I'm driving to work in like 20-minute increments, and I
yeah,
keep coming back
yeah.
to them. But lots of cool stuff. And Shawn, we'll definitely talk in the future, maybe something after the new year, or we'll get together again and do another podcast on whatever the heck we want to talk about, because we
Right,
make
right.
our own rules here.
Yeah, yeah, for
So,
sure.
yeah, definitely. So, guys, if you like interviews like this, podcasts like this, another episode of Dropping Down from the Rafters, because I want to bring the excitement to podcasts like Sting brought the excitement to my life when he dropped down from the rafters. So, guys, make sure you hit that red subscribe button so you guys can stay tuned in here to Toned In Entertainment for future videos. Subscribe to the channel. Do it. Go now. Do it now.